Welcome to Draw Process, page 71 of episode 2 of my comic First Sun and Sword. I'm Ike, and this is where I share the entire process of drawing the pages of my comic and share my thoughts as I practice my art and become the practice of my art. I really try to focus on the development of myself as I experience the conflict, the friction with the reality of the work, of the creative work. So you'll hear about that today, and I do one of these every week if you're new here. So you will see these are my thumbnails. I'm very quickly trying to lay out the ideas that are in my head. I know some basic things about the characters, what needs to happen at this point in the plot. The script is very loose, but I know that this needs to transpire, this interaction, and what will happen next. And so I'm going through the story and the images. So I'm free to do whatever I want, not having a script that's pre-written in detail. It's whatever feels right to me to show. There's no one dictating to me, you need a close-up of this character now, or even how much has to fit in one page. I'm choosing how much to fit in a page as I draw and sort of write the story. That's a very important part of sequential storytelling, is how much do you put on one page, unless you're looking at like an infinite scroll kind of model from webcomics perhaps, which mine do that too. On my website, all my webcomics are in the infinite scroll format. I just find it easier. I think you can click on them, click on the images and they'll pop up and fill the screen, and then you can sort of cycle through them one at a time. So there's a few options, but when it comes to comics, part of this art form typically is the page, the size of the page and what goes on a page and what goes next to a page or after a page turn. When you can see the double page spread, the 2 pages in front of you, turn the page, see the next 2. That becomes part of the storytelling, how you utilize that. But I get to decide as I'm making up the page, what will the page be? What will the arc of the page be? Both visually and in terms of story. And they're really no different. You know, some people, they think maybe too much about the literary story and what will be the story of the page. And some people might think too much in the visual. What is the visual story of this page? Someone shrinking, someone else growing, something moving and then going splat. I'm trying to speak in real abstracts here. Visually, what's the story? And some people will think too much in that sense. But really, it's all the same thing. It's all storytelling. Some of it is literary, but it's also the drawings, the art. It's the facial expressions. All of it's communicating. So I like to think, what is the arc, A-R-C, the arc of a page, the arc of the story on that page. So this page starts with Farah and Sun looking at each other nervously, getting ready to board the boat, to be surrounded by men, soldiers, to be, in this large new setting, which you'll see in the next row of the panel, number 4. So we have the first 3 panels is the movement of Farah and Sun from this pensive, looking at each other and worrying. So we get the sense of their emotion, their what they're thinking, and we see them move. So the camera pulls away and we see their entire bodies moving onto the boat. And then we see them in the center of the 3rd panel, surrounded with men on either side, kind of encircling them. So they're becoming enclosed here. But yeah, the overall arc of this page, we go from their nervousness stepping into. We see them step into the new environment, the new reality, and be confronted by a powerful figure, which is the general of the head of the Navy of this city, this port city, who happens to be on this particular boat. And so he's going to be an imposing figure. We've already seen him in panels, but in this page, at the last panel, it's a close-up on his head and his words. Both the words and the size of his head convey that the importance or the weight of this figure. And it's kind of that simple. As far as the visual flow, yes, it gets a little disjointed. The way I do comics, it's often kind of disjointed. These first three panels, they're similar in size and shape, and they're side by side, so they tell a very straightforward boom, boom, boom ABC story, like a comic strip or an animation, just boom, boom, boom. They work as a unit in and of themselves. Some people will treat the entire page on that scale, the scale of boom, 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 the scale of this straightforward flow from one point to another. Nothing wrong with that exactly. Definitely nothing wrong with it, I'll say. But the way that I do comics, I try to put a lot in each page. I want a lot of panels, a lot of story, a lot of changes in the figures and their feelings and where they're located and what's happening. I want a lot communicated per page. So I'm going to, have a small panel like this that shows her up on the boat. This moment where she steps onto the boat and is surrounded by men could have filled half a page. I could have made that really weighty. But I do care about the real estate of the story. I will make things weighty at times, but I'm not going super to the extreme with that. I'm not going to fill a page with a splash page. Now, these are all just personal tastes. This is my voice, my storytelling, and you should just know that these are all things that you will think about in your own art practice in making comics. This is what comic artists have to think about if they want to reflect on what kind of storyteller they are. Then they're going to have to, that's what's going to help them improve, and they're going to have to do that and wonder, why don't I make more dynamic pages? Why don't I focus on the flow of the whole page rather than in beats? My pages contain sometimes 3 paragraphs, let's say, and some people will go for 1 per page, as an analogy. How dynamic, how weighty do I make moments? Now, what's my personal taste in that matter? But it's not just what's my taste, this is what I like, I'm going to do it that way. That's not how this works. Like, you start creating and you start to wonder, why do I do it that way? Why do I have this bias that I happen to do it this way? So what about me had me wanting to do it that way? What if that isn't the best way? What if I could change? So we're getting back to what I said at the start, being my practice, letting my practice change me, and then I will create differently and become a better storyteller, more nuanced, more complex, more developed through a process of personal development. That's the way that I think about it. That's what, even if it's just, even if I'm wrong, even if this is just how I think about it, at least it makes it interesting for me. It makes it a life worth living, right? Not that this is my whole life, but it's part of a life worth living. So it motivates me and it interests me, and that's how I process it. Other people might do it a different way, but I know there's people like me that would like to do it this way. Think it through in this very personal way. So yeah, why do I not? Let me give an example. I'm not going to name names, but there's comics. It's pretty common in comics to have a more dynamic range and than I do in terms of these panels. Like I said, maybe one paragraph per page instead of 3, as I might do. Instead of, they may show, let's say, the moment that they walk on the boat. That is the entire panel. I mean, the entire page. That one panel fills the rest of the page. And you get this boom, this really big moment. But that's a pause when you do that. You're instilling like boom, boom, pause. If you think of it like rhythmically in beats, panel, panel, pause, panel, panel, pause, boom, boom, boom. If you get a certain rhythm to your storytelling like that, to me, it can become pretty monotone. Like, it's kind of like people. It's like Shakespeare versus like modern speech that very brief, just a few words per sentence, done, move on. There's other ways to do it, where you can say more. And it can be just as good or better, let's say. There's a certain cadence, rhythm to the work that I do. It's not as dynamic, as extreme in the dynamics, but it has a little more like maybe flow or diversity within a tighter range. I don't know how to describe that. Maybe it's like classical music. There's more happening versus modern pop music. There's more happening. It's somewhat less dynamic, less in your face, but there's a lot of notes being hit and different parts being played that go together. And that's my attempt at explaining or comparing my choices as I understand them, as best as I understand them at this time. I have to keep learning and keep developing and keep questioning why I do what I do, and looking at other people's work and wondering, why do they do it that way? And it can be interesting to know what people's influences are, but the influences are not my lens. I'm not looking. I used to be self-conscious about not being that interested in the influences. Because, of course, if you're new and you're not aware of your influences or the influences in the art you see, then you might be kind of less creative. You might mimic what's come before and not create something new, maybe. I mean, that's the narrative we're told. You're not serious if you don't know the history. There's some truth to that. But that's not all. That's really just a narrative. That's one way of thinking about it. And it doesn't suit me best. So when I look at people's work, I'm a little less interested in their influences. I'm more interested in this really intrapersonal, really, what is this person's perspective? What are their biases? What's the rhythm and the flow of what they're doing? How does it strike me in and of itself? What does it tell me about this person in and of itself? Not by comparison. Just what do I feel from this piece, from this person? Yeah, that's kind of hard to explain. But like you when you meet someone, you could assess them based on their physical looks, their intelligence, their personality traits. You could try to measure those things and compare them, or to certain, archetypes or other people that you're comparing them to. But you can also get a sense from someone of the gestalt, of the the whole sense of that person that strikes you. And you might go, wow, I really like this person, or I don't know why I don't like this person. Something strikes you about the whole as it's presented that's more than the sum of its parts. You can't just break it down into the pieces. And that's what I'm really looking for, is the whole. Of how does this strike me? And then, then I can dissect it. I can try to see why. And I'm also highly interested in the process. That's why I make these videos and show you literally how I do this. Because when I look at the finished pages and I'm assessing how does this strike me about this artist, what they're doing, where they're coming from, and their perspective and so on, I'm also assessing how are they doing it. From what I can tell from the finished page, how did they put this together? And it may look great, but if I can tell that they put it together in a way that doesn't suit my tastes, then I'm not going to really like it. Literally, if there's a perfection to it that's very carefully, not just in finishing touches, but in the construction of it, it actually turns me off. Like I'm not so interested when it's pristine like that. When the environments and perspectives seem to have been sort of traced, and the figures, if they're sort of traced from, let's say, photographs, even ones that the person took themselves, I can often get a sense of that, because there's something about the collaging together of these elements. There's something about the quality of the line work that sort of betrays where it came from. It just strikes me as a whole, as I can see something about that. I noticed things like in older work, in much older work, they didn't have the kind of reference we have today. And sometimes I would see a lot of reference that comes from old films and photographs from, let's say, stage productions. What we can look, we could look up sci-fi movies, Viking movies, whatever. We can find reference that way, or video games, or whatever, all kinds of things we can just Google. But I've seen from earlier time periods, the 50s artists, for example, they might be looking at silent films or something, or stage productions. Because a lot of films where the camera was from a long lens, a long distance, and I guess that's a narrow lens, but and it would kind of flatten the image, and it would just kind of be a static. The figures, the actors would be smaller in the frame, and you would have a lot of environment. The horizon line would be very level, and things would be flattened out quite a bit, because that's how it looks from the audience's perspective and from the cameras they used perspective. And so you look at their comic panels and they look like that. They've referenced those things and tended to construct that way. Whereas these days you see a lot more wide angle lenses, like with fisheye lens, things that are like a little more distorted, like when you do a selfie. It actually kind of makes your face look narrower, because there's a warping of things. So many of our images are like that. Even in film, there's more of that distortion, that you have artists drawing that way more. We're influenced by what we see in the culture, whether we're using reference or not. But there's nothing wrong with that. I wasn't saying I don't like those artists that used to use that reference, but you can see these unique things that were affecting artists, influencing their style and how they produce it, and how they produce it affects the gestalt. It affects the impression from the whole that I get, that people can get from it. Whether whether you like it or not, that's how it will affect it. If you change tools, if you use Photoshop, it's going to affect it. That's a feature, not a bug. It's a good thing, I think, that we can see behind the curtain through observing the whole, what sense we get from it, how we feel about it. We can kind of start to deduce and get a sense of ways that it came to us, what it passed through to get to us, what the message passed through to get to us, and what it, brings out from within us too. That's how it should be, and it's cool. I like that. So that makes me think about the aspect of what I'm doing that is about speed. It's about being efficient, brief, so if it's more, I want to be more expressive and more fluid because I want to be fast. And I want it to be sharp, to the point. When it comes to expressions and what lines go down, I want a certain efficiency. Now, I don't want to completely worship efficiency. My goal is the finished comic book, the story, the communication of story. That is my number one. I do not want to fetishize some aspect of it. Some people, their art will fetishize. It'll get really into line quality, different inking quality, or it might get into efficiency, simplicity. Look at Mike Mignola with extreme simplicity and stark contrast. You can get so into those elements that you could lose track of the point of telling a story and letting yourself, develop and change. And nothing wrong with that. Again, this is my tastes. It's cool that there's all kinds of people that do it all kinds of ways. It's very fascinating to me that someone would fetishize a certain aspect of the creative process and go to the extreme with it. It can be interesting and fascinating, but there's consequences to that. For example, being slow. You might be very slow at completing pages. You might lose track of the whole instead of the gestalt, the whole picture, the whole image. My focus is on the storytelling, telling a story. I will get faster at it and more efficient, more expressive, more effective at communicating the story. I am not concerned about getting better at anatomy, getting better at inking quality, the perfection of the techniques I'm using. I'm not really concerned about any of that. Now, my inking quality and all of my anatomy, all of that improves over time. All of it is improving, but that's not my concern. That's not going to be my focus. It will just be a byproduct. And the main point is to get better at the storytelling and more efficient with it. I'm moving towards getting faster at this. So these pages might take me 2.5 to 3.5 hours, I believe. Most of the time, 3.5. I want to, and that's without counting the coloring. And I want to get the entire process from start to finish, including any colors or values I lay down, lettering. I would like to get the entire process down to like 2 hours per page and maintain the complexity of the environments and the characters, and that these are actors on, in the environment on set. I've got to have all the set pieces, all the dressings of it. It doesn't have to be the most elaborate costumes, or the most elaborate set dressings. I don't care if this is like what the boat actually would look like. Yes, I looked up a few pictures of boats. I'm not worried about this looking exactly right. It has to be good enough to be believable enough to convey the story and let you move on. People are only looking at these panels for half a second at times. It doesn't have to be in great detail. And that's my tastes, because there's also the market, right? I think some of the reasons people make choices of the style of art they're going to do is not about the art, and I'm trying to make sure it is about the art. It is about this practice development. But for a lot of us, it becomes about the marketplace. It's like, well, if someone's going to pick up a book, we want them to be wowed by it. So we better have big splash pages with raunchy or bloody or really great art. We better have the pristine quality and the line work and everything. Extreme, surprising, really good set dressings, lots of design of the world. Some of those things could be things you would do just because you're fascinated and interested and you want to tell the story that way. But a lot of times people are doing that because they think that's what the market will require. That's the only way I'm going to get this book sold. Now, do what you want. I have no judgment for people that are trying to make a product for a market. It's just that we should know that that's a choice. It's not literally how things are. That it's a decision people make to base it on that, and it does not always work out anyways. A lot of times these books aren't profitable anyways, or don't get finished or something. That's not reality. That's the market. And that's different than a comic book. That's different than sequential storytelling, telling a story this way. And that's my soapbox. Speech there. So, and the page is just about done. So I hope you enjoyed me rambling on about this perspective I have on making comic books and developing your practice, and maybe that's something that'll help you with your own journey here. Be the practice of your art and encourage others to do the same. I'll see you next week.